The Philadelphia Eagles missed a lot of their free agents that left after the 2022 season. Who could they potentially miss heading into 2024? We'll get into that and more coming up on this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on, Eagles fans. I'm Louis DiBiase. He's Gino Camilleri. We're the hosts of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Eagles analysts also over at Bleacher Report. On today's Locked On Eagles, what departures might the Eagles feel the impact of heading into the 2024 season? We also take a look at who the biggest NFC contenders are now on paper after free agency, the first wave at least. We also discuss why Jalen Hurts is the key to maximizing Saquon Barkley this season. We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 back if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. And Gino, as I alluded to, you look at after the Super Bowl season, and this tends to happen after a title window. I shouldn't say closes, but after a big year like that, normally you miss a lot of people, not just players, but the coaching staff. You lose, in 2017, Frank Reich, John DeFilippo. This past season, you lost Shane Steichen, and I don't think they missed Jonathan Gannon, but you lose coaches to promotions. You lose a lot of free agents who try to cash in after a title window. The NFL tries to steal your talent when you're very good. And so that's what happened last year. They felt the impact of that in the 2023 season. But this year, I don't know. Do you feel like anybody that left, at least as of yet, and we can talk about the retirements too, like who do you think they're going to feel the impact of losing, like last year, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson or Javon Hargrave, or if there's even anybody to that impact?
I want to first start by saying, do people realize why it's so hard to go back-to-back in the National Football League? Outside of New England Patriots, who have done it a couple times, you look at the Kansas City Chiefs as of late. It's so evident because after that good season, it becomes open season to poach your roster.
You get picked clean.
Picked clean. And look at that. You lose everybody in your offensive front office after 2017. Your defensive core, for the most part, is turned over. And look at 2022. That's a similar story. Your offensive coordinator, Shane Steichen, who seemed to be the brains behind the operation of getting the best out of Jalen in 2022, he's gone. Then look at the defense. Kyzier White, TJ Edwards, Marcus Epps, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, heck, to the point where they even bring Chauncey back because they missed him so much. But if I were to look at this group right now, I would have to say probably Avonte Maddox, because
I agree.
That's the one guy, even though he wasn't on the field all of the time, that had the continuity next to Darius Slay, next to James Bradbury. It's going to be open competition for the first time in, heck, since 2018 when it was Avonte and Cravon and Nickel Roby Coleman for a little bit. And that is the difficult part of it, is that now in this post-Jalen Hurts contract world, those decisions that might have been easy, we'll keep Avonte Maddox, we'll restructure him, they get a little bit more difficult in this go-around. I would also say the two guys that I think you are going to miss, and it might not come into play in the first 10 weeks of the season, it might come more into play towards the end. I think it's your guys in Fletcher Cox and Jason Kelce, man.
Jason Kelce, you're going to miss more than anybody in a very long time. Right. So I think it's obvious that it's Jason Kelce. I want to believe that it won't be Fletcher Cox as much, that Jordan Davis takes that step this year. Jalen Carter continues to be elite. Milton Williams shows he can be more in a bigger role. But Jason Kelce, even though I love the replacement in Cam Jurgens, he's not going to be the greatest center of all time, potentially, like Jason Kelce.
Yeah, that was the low-hanging fruit one.
Absolutely. Sure. I love the Avonte Maddox one, though, because I think him being injured these last 2 years showed you the value of him. It shows you that you might miss him this year, because when he was not out there, the Eagles really did struggle to defend slot receivers. The good thing is, though, Gino, again, glass half full approach with this compared to last year, I'm more confident in the replacements that are coming, that are already here, or that could come, right? Because when you look at Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, we didn't feel great about the replacements at safety when he and Marcus Epps left. This year, I feel good about the replacements at safety. When you look at center, although you don't want to ever lose Jason Kelce, I feel good about Cam Jurgens. I feel good about the young defensive tackles that are replacing Fletcher Cox. With Avonte, they haven't. Isaiah Rodgers is somebody that people are excited about. But when you combine that on top of, it's a deep slot class as well in the draft. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's here. He can play in the slot. He might be the biggest when you feel it, but I do like the alternatives they have now compared to when you needed Josiah Scott or Bradley Roby to play that position.
And it's such an important position in today's National Football League. And of course, Jason Kelce, we're going to miss him more than just what he does on the field. Like that impact of what him and Fletcher Cox, that motivational element towards the end of the season is going to be big. But one thing I think they missed in 2023 as well, Lou, was that depth element. And how are you going to replace guys like Jack Driscoll and Sua Opeta? You can't say that those two guys didn't play meaningful snaps for you over the last 3 or 4. Sua Opeta started playoff games for you folks. Like you need to find depth. And that's why 2017 was so good and 2022 was so good, is because once option 1A went down, you had 2, 3, 4 ready to go. And that's why last year when Avonte goes out, what is your next option? Oh, Zach, he is out of the game. Then it was, we have to move Bradbury over. We don't have CGG.
Right. We got to force an undrafted kid and Eli Ricks to play out of position. So the good thing is, Gino, I don't think there's, outside of Avonte Maddox, I'm having a hard time. Like, I don't think they're going to miss Kevin Byard. As long as Saquon Barkley doesn't get hurt, you shouldn't miss DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, we're really nitpicking here at what we're missing out.
Maybe if Nakobe Dean just gets hurt again or can't play, and Devin White's who he was last year, maybe you miss Zach Cunningham if he's not brought back. But
I think they bring him back.
I could see that too. I think Avonte Maddox is really the only guy you could say, and there are some good options to replace him, and he could still be back, but he's the guy I'd say you might look back and be like, okay, they're definitely missing that player on defense. But that's the good news for this year. It's the bad news for last year is you really just didn't do a good job of filling those holes in the roster. So the guys that are leaving, it's like, I'm okay with them leaving.
Yeah, they're replacement level players.
Yeah, you didn't really lose a lot of key pieces.
Avonte Maddox is not the same player he was before all of these injuries, and that's the world that we have to look at it. He was not the same player when he came back from that injury in the second half of last season. And look at the Buffalo Bills, Lou. I mean, they cut Tre'Davious White for some very similar reasons, right? Like a higher end player at his position. Yep. But the best availability is reliability and being on the field. And that's why the CGJ move is so much more important, to where the departures, they didn't make up for them last year. I believe that what they're losing out on this year, they're also trying to recoup what happened last year, to where they're almost overemphasizing it to a point. We'll hope they continue to go down that road, because you're still going to have to find more bodies to play linebacker for you. And you're still going to have to potentially get multiple wide receivers to throw in there and potentially another tight end. So we'll see how Howie Roseman does with these depth pieces, but it's March 20th, Lou, and this is really what we're talking about in a team building perspective, to where the big concern was last year. It's almost August and we don't have a starting safety in this building right now.
It was a problem.
They had to go and trade for Kevin Byard. So hopefully you don't get to those problems where we're like, oh, we need to trade for Jay Ajayi. We need to trade for Golden Tate. We need to trade for Kevin Byard. You have to address those problems now, so 2023 doesn't happen, because you cannot be reactive. You got to be proactive like that year before.
And I think they've already been that the first week of free agency. I think upgraded this roster tremendously on both sides of the ball. The rest of the NFC, though, also made some big moves. I want to just take a look around the conference and see who the biggest threats to the Eagles could be on paper heading into 2024. All that and more coming your way right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Eagles is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, what brings home the winning trophy, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions do apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Guys, as you know, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today. Baseball fans, mark your calendars for March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time for the best MLB season preview coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today. Again, that's March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Be the first to get local insight from the MLB local experts of our network, the Locked On Podcast Network. Again, it's March 20th at 7 p.m. on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel. You can find it on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. So the Eagles tremendously improved, I think, the first week of free agency. But, Gino, I think the rest of the NFC did as well. This was seen heading into last year as the weaker conference, especially from a quarterback perspective. But when you look at the rosters, I think a lot of teams got better, specifically in the NFC North. Like, that looks like a division that was really bad, and heading into this year, it looks good on paper. When it comes to, because I still think the Eagles are going to bounce back this year. They're a top 3 team in this conference. When it comes to who their biggest threats are on paper right now, especially after free agency, who are you looking at?
I'm going to start by saying one thing. Jerry Jones, your team went all in last year, sir. You have gotten exponentially worse over the last couple
Dallas took a
weeks.
step back a lot in the NFC. Like, a lot of teams got better, and they're just very stagnant.
Yeah, you could clip that one, Locked On Cowboys. Use that for some content.
Which is crazy. It feels like he's just so complacent, and he's just settling for what he has now. I don't know if it's because it's his older age. He feels like he can't hit the reset button anymore, but it just feels very middling in Dallas. And, like, you just lost to a 7 seed. I think that's crazy to be so satisfied.
And who has gotten better? I mean, Atlanta,
everybody.
Are they a bigger threat now than the Dallas Cowboys were? In my opinion, for sure. I think Seattle is still continuing to make very good signings out west. They're just getting better. How good is that quarterback room going to be? We will ultimately see. But I think you're right, man. Like, the NFC North, Green Bay is a powerhouse that they're maybe 6 months to like 18 months away from being one of the top tier teams in the national.
I think they're the second biggest threat outside of San Francisco. They almost made it to the NFC title last year. This year, they add Xavier McKinney and Josh Jacobs on both sides of the ball, with Jordan Love heading into that second year as a starter. Yeah, I think Green Bay is a force.
They're young. They drafted well over the last couple of years. They made a very good signing in Josh Jacobs. Their defense should be better. I'm with you. Detroit shouldn't get any worse. We're going to see Caleb Williams coming into this conference now, with Chicago being probably better than they were last year too.
Long term, I think they're going to be a problem. Like, they add Keenan Allen, DeAndre Swift in the backfield.
That's the division to get worried about, because the West, we kind of know what's going on there. Like, Arizona's going to take a while to get back on track. You have San Fran, who's going to be the powerhouse, and then Seattle and the Rams are going to continue to compete for that second spot there.
Right.
The South, I think Atlanta kind of pushed themselves ahead, with the rest of the teams kind of just battling for the middle. Then you got the NFC East, where Washington makes all of these signings to where it could either dramatically make them better, or it could be dream team-esque, where it's like they just sign all these guys past their prime. Then you have New York, who brings in Brian Burns, opposite of Kayvon Thibodeau. This conference has gotten exponentially better, Lou.
Yeah.
And from where we were talking last year, who's the second best quarterback, where we are legitimately making a claim that it's Jalen Hurts, you got Dak Prescott there, you got Brock, and then who's like past them? It's like a middling Kirk
now
Cousins.
It's Jordan Love.
Now he's got weapons down in Atlanta. Now you got a good Jordan Love, a good
Caleb
Jared
Williams.
Goff.
Kyler Murray's healthy. He had a pretty good end of the season, Gino.
It's not that the quarterbacks got extremely better. It's that the situations for these teams got Atlanta is in a way better spot than they were a couple weeks ago, man.
And like you mentioned in the NFC East, like, let's say Washington takes Drake May or Jaden Daniel with that second pick. Like, that's another young top quarterback.
It's going to be good.
Yeah, I don't know what New York's going to do with that 6th overall pick, but the NFC definitely caught up this year from just a quarterback perspective and overall the rosters. I would still say, obviously, for the Eagles in 2024, San Francisco is still the top dog you got to take care of.
100%.
Although they lost Eric Armstead and Chase Young, they got Leonard Floyd back. There's trade rumors about Brandon Ayuk. Like, I will say, for this year, they're still the top tier team, but the roster's getting older, Gino, and they don't have the quarterback to carry if the roster becomes less talented like the Eagles do and a lot of these other teams in the conference. So this year it's San Fran, but I don't know. Like, they're, I think, on the downturn more so than the Eagles are. Like, I think the Eagles are still somebody I would project to be better longer than the 49ers. Not saying they'll be better than the 49ers this year, but I think long term, the Eagles look better right now.
All right, let me ask you 3 questions that all fall in the same range.
Yeah.
Biggest threat in the East? biggest threat in the conference,
Okay,
and then biggest dark horse threat.
I think the biggest threat in the East, unfortunately, is still Dallas, although I kind of like what Washington's building a little bit. I would say in the conference, it's still San Francisco. Dark horse, I think it's Chicago. Like, they were a 7-win team last year. Now you add, I like Justin Fields. I think Caleb Williams is going to be better. You add a quarterback that should be 2 to 3 more wins. You add Keenan Allen. You add Kevin Byard is okay at safety. You add DeAndre Swift, Montez Sweat in year 2. Like, that defense is better. You extend Jalen Johnson. Chicago's that dark horse team where I wouldn't be surprised if they're better than Detroit this year.
I think Green Bay is the dark horse team. That's the only one I'm going to
Can you consider them dark horse anymore, though? Like, I think they're on the map now.
People are still going to look at that Detroit team as the favorite.
I think so, too. That's a fair point. Yeah.
They're still going to compete. I think Detroit is still going to be
long term. I like Detroit third. I think they're going to be better than Chicago this year, and they'll push with Green Bay. But long term, I'd actually maybe rather be the Bears than the Lions.
If Jordan Love plays the way that he did the second half of the season, which was in consideration to be
MVP,
the best quarterback
he was MVP
all in that second half,
right?
With a Josh Jacobs there now, and maybe the best young tight end duo with the two guys that they drafted.
Right. Christian Watson stays healthy this year too. He was kind of a shell of himself.
Jaden Reed is going to take another step more than likely, and they got some good corners out there. And I think they're going to be a difficult team. We'll see how their defense does, but that's the one team I'm like, okay, you got to watch out for them. And then at the end of the day, Atlanta with what they had, because we've seen in our division Kirk Cousins with weapons. Those Washington teams with Pierre, with Deshaun Jackson, when he has the guys that could help lift the burden and he doesn't have to do it all, that's really where Kirk thrives, man. And I think he started to that team is starting to separate themselves in that division. And it's good because I think the Eagles need more in-conference competition going into the playoffs and like being ready to play these good teams and like not having to just go out there and play a bad Carolina team and then you go play a bad Arizona team. It's like, no, all of these teams outside of maybe 2 in the conference are going to be competitive.
Absolutely. I want to talk a little Jalen Hurts coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. I think he's the key to maximizing Saquon Barkley. We'll get into why as we continue this Wednesday edition of Locked On Eagles.
As we roll on this edition of LOE, we have a message from our friends over at FanDuel, the official sportsbook of America, the Locked On Podcast Network, and the Locked On Eagles podcast. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel is here for you every game of the tournament. Heck, your bracket could be ruined already after the games yesterday. FanDuel, they're the place that you want to go if you want to consistently have a chance to win. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets simply by winning any $5 wager. All you have to do, put down an Abraham Lincoln. If your bet wins, you get $200 in bonus bucks. Use those on point spreads, money lines, and you can even pick who is going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the net. We thank FanDuel for being the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network and LOE.
All right, Gino, let's talk a little backfield for the Eagles offense. Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley, who, of course, they bring in to replace DeAndre Swift. The Eagles are going for it on offense this year. Again, we've both said this might be, I think it is, their most talented group of skill position players in franchise history. And there's been some great offenses in Philadelphia, but this one just on paper looks explosive. For me, though, to maximize Saquon Barkley, even if he's like as good as, he'd be better than DeAndre Swift running the football this year than last year, Miles Sanders in 2022. I think he's going to top those guys from a rushing perspective, but he's got it to really fully justify this contract. He needs to be the do-it-all weapon that DeAndre Swift really wasn't surprisingly last year, and that Miles Sanders has not been since 2019. And I'm very confident that Kellen Moore will use him in creative ways as a receiver, unlike Brian Johnson did with DeAndre Swift. But I think Jalen Hurts is the key to maximizing him by getting him the football in the passing game. There's times where, I don't know, I feel like mobile quarterbacks don't always utilize a running back in the passing game. For me, to get the most out of Saquon this year, like, they got to get him the ball. He's got to be that, third or fourth target, like 3A, 3B with Dallas Goedert.
We were hoping that DeAndre Swift was going to bring that element.
After the summer, everybody said he was like their third best receiver from a hands perspective.
Whether if it was just out of pure negligence or if it was Kenny Gainwell just somebody's favorite player, why they continue to throw him out there. It wasn't a true DeAndre Swift is the best guy. We're going to give him every opportunity. Where Saquon, you pay him this contract and give him this role.
It's to be a weapon, not a running back. Yeah.
That he is going to do everything for you. And there have been multiple people who have said, and I tend to disagree, but I see where they're coming from, that when DeAndre Swift was out there, you kind of knew what was coming, right? Because he was a first and second down back, and then it would be the Kenny Gainwell change up to a little degree. Now with Saquon out there, it's like the world is your oyster right now, Kellen Moore. Like, you can do anything. Like, you have this pearl in hand in Saquon Barkley, which is a force multiplier to the rest of your offense, where now you have to focus on this guy in the backfield who's built like A.J. Brown, can catch the ball, can run the ball. We got to focus everything on him, stopping him downhill, to where that's what the Eagles' game plan was to defend the Giants, because they weren't worried about the wide receivers. Well, now you got two all-pro caliber guys that can catch the ball behind him. I think he's not just the key for Jalen Hurts, though. I think he's the key for this offense, because we know what Kellen Moore likes to do. Go look at how he used Austin Eckler. Go look at how he used Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard in his time in Dallas. He loves using running backs in multiple different ways. That's what it's going to have to be. It's going to have to be that three-down cohesiveness. Saquon gets 30 touches a game minimum. Like, minimum, he should touch the ball 30 times a game, whether that's through the run, through the pass. This guy is a force multiplier for you, and he is going to carry the burden for at least 3 years, and that's what you signed up for. You didn't sign up for this DeMarco Murray crazy long contract. It's 3 years. You know what the running backs are in today's world, but he is a different character, and he is going to bring a different element to the passing game. That I'll keep going back. 2019 Miles Sanders, where 2019 Miles Sanders was the passing offense. It was the middle of the field. It was, we're going to get him on wheel routes. We're going to put him on option routes. That opens up the playbook yet again. I mean, you were limiting yourself to everything behind the line of scrimmage, because
even though you had the personnel, Gino, like you said, there was no reason to be predictable when you had Swift out there. But you're right, they kind of were, because Brian Johnson did not use him the way I think Kellen Moore will for Saquon.
I 100% agree. It's like, why didn't you have this semblance of a passing game behind the line of scrimmage? Because everybody knew what was coming. Now you have a queen on a chessboard. Like, the guy can go anywhere. He's going to do everything for you. He has good hands. He has the vision. He has the explosiveness. You got to keep him healthy, and that's what this offensive line is going to do. But now having Jeff Stoutland with his offensive line protecting this caliber of an asset, I don't want to see. Oh, I do. I'm very excited to see how it pays off.
I was going to say,
good luck to those defensive coordinators, man. Like, how are you going to defend this offense once it gets clicking in that RPO game? And now you have to account for, are they handing it off to Saquon? Is Jalen Hurts keeping it? Oh, boom, they have AJ
it's
Brown
a new
on
element.
That quick slant. It is something that we haven't seen. I believe Kellen Moore is the right guy to get that out of this offense.
And it's crazy because in 2022, they didn't have that, and they were the best offense in football. Imagine if they can get back to that ceiling and they add a Saquon Barkley. It just adds a brand new element. And so Jalen Hurts was a guy that last year, he was frustrated by the offense. He was frustrated at the lack of a short and intermediate passing game. We read that article from ESPN. But also at the same time, Jalen forced the issue, and that's why you saw an uptick in turnovers. Well, here's that antidote, Saquon Barkley. So he needs to make sure that
just get it to the kid.
He gets some of the football. And again, like, sometimes mobile quarterbacks, because they choose to run after 2 to 3 reads, they don't often use a running back in the passing game. But I will say with Jalen, like, normally in his career, he's been good at making the smart play, like balancing when to run versus when to check it down. Like, he has used Kenneth Gainwell a lot, especially in the 2-minute drill. So I'm confident, even though he is a mobile quarterback and they traditionally don't use this kind of player a lot, I'm confident Hurts will utilize Barkley in the right way.
I hope it's a good way to continue to develop Jalen Hurts to prolong his career. To where it's like, I don't have to take this hit. I can just give it to that guy who can squat more than me, and I could squat 600 pounds, and he'll go and do that, right? And that's how you get these quarterbacks to begin to gain confidence in the check down, and they don't have to do it all, because that's what it was. It was Jalen forcing the issue last year. You get that comfortability with these guys that you can rely on and trust, where it's like, I know I can go get the yards. I don't trust this guy to go get the yards. I was like, this guy can go do it. He did it against your team with a bad offensive line. Now what can he do with Lane Johnson leading the way and Landon Dickerson pulling?
I can't wait, man. I cannot wait to watch this offense. It's only March, but I'm
fun.
already just salivating thinking about the potential. We'll be back right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast this week, Thursday and Friday. Thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. That will do it for today's episode, though. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off. As always, thank you for downloading, thank you for watching and listening, and let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.